Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Time-Crossed Lovers in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 41, Paperwork and Partings. After they ate lunch, Dimitri and Byleth worked through dinner as well. Between scouting reports, supply reports, regular paperwork, and final touches on possible battle tactics, there was a lot to do. Most of this is dry, but I can see the necessity. Suthies yawned. I think I shall go to sleep early tonight, we must be up before the sun anyway. Byleth nods and continues working. You do not have to continue if you'd prefer. Dimitri was putting a stack of reports about food supplies to the side. You've done more than enough already. It's fine, I don't exactly have anything better to do. Also, if I don't help, you'll be up all night doing this. Byleth also knew that Dimitri would insist on accompanying her as far as he could when she left. He would still need to go about tomorrow as normal, so he would need to actually sleep tonight. Dimitri beamed at her. My thanks, you have always been so unfailingly helpful. It's nothing. They work in silence for a while until they hear someone approaching. Byleth quickly dives behind some furniture before their guest gets too close. Dimitri, meanwhile, moves the papers around, so it isn't so obvious he wasn't the only one working. Your Majesty, are you faring well? That was Didu's voice. You've been in here all day, and while I know that you've been eating. I am fine, Didu, everything is fine. Dimitri rushes to get out. I simply have a lot of work to do before we start marching again. Didu is quiet for a moment before he begins talking again. I am aware that you have many responsibilities, I am worried though. Now that Lady Byleth is gone, I do not wish for you to slip back into old habits. Byleth was worried about that herself. If the rumor mill was anything to go by, Dimitri started taking much better care of himself right after Geralt's mercenaries were recruited. With all due respect, you have been in your tent all day. While it is good that you've gone to get food, staying here all day could still be detrimental. Dimitri sighed. I promise, it is just for today. I have been working so that we can march to Anbar with minimal issue. His hands fisted at his sides. I want everything to go as smoothly as possible. Everyone deserves to finally have this war end. As you say, Your Majesty. Despite all the reports that had to be gone though, working in his tent all day had been a joy. It was a stark reminder of how well they worked together. Unfortunately, Dimitri could not get the thought that Byleth would be leaving in the morning out of his head. Not for long anyway, as her being with him served as a wonderful distraction. Even despite all their issues and the unintentional hardships his negligence had caused, seeing his beloved every day and spending so much time with her father was an honor he did not deserve. He was greedy though and wanted it all, nonetheless. Dimitri knows that Byleth was right, they could see each other in their shared dreams and send letters, but it would not be the same. It would pale in comparison to sharing meals and sparring in the camp, especially since the others were finally warming up to Byleth. Dimitri, is everything okay? Byleth's voice broke through his thoughts. It was then Dimitri realized that he'd paused while preparing for bed. It was earlier than he usually went to sleep, but if he was going to see Byleth off, he would be getting up much earlier than normal. Apologies, I got lost in thought. Dimitri turned and saw Byleth beginning to set up her bedroll again. He wishes she would take his bed but knows that would be a fool's errand. He'd much prefer to spend their remaining time together without tension or fighting. A part of him wishes that they could share his cot. It was certainly big enough for two, but he would not dare ask for such a thing. Not only was it extremely improper, but it would also likely anger Byleth. That's understandable, a lot has happened. A lot is about to happen. Byleth finishes setting up her bedroll and lays down. Is there anything in particular you'd like to discuss? Byleth was always much too kind to him. Given her view on things, it would have been much easier for her to have turned away from him and avoided getting involved with the kingdom and the war altogether. She hadn't done that though. Not helping him had probably never even occurred to her. There is nothing in particular I wish to talk about. You already know that I'd prefer you not leave, but I know you need to. Byleth was not safe as long as the Archbishop was around. He knew that, and yet. It's okay that you don't want all this to be necessary, said Byleth. It's not like you're trying to keep me here. You've accepted what we need to do. Dmitri supposes that is true. Holding her here with him had never even crossed his mind. I know it probably doesn't feel like enough, but I promise to write. I know it won't be easy to send me letters, but I will keep it up myself. That's not even considering our dreams. Byleth sits up to get a better look at him. I won't automatically try to end things when they happen anymore. That was much more than he deserved. I thank you for that. Your words mean a lot to me. Everything is going to work out one way or another. Maybe not always in a way you'd like, but you and I are going to come out of this on the other side. She sounded so certain. All we have to do for now is get through tomorrow morning. I'll send word of my safety as soon as I am able. Byleth was always so benevolent, always finding ways to calm him. She deserved so much better than a wretch like him. Dmitri would do all he could for her all the same. And she was right. The first step was to get her out of camp safely in the morning. The camp was eerily quiet as they snuck towards the stables. Dmitri knows they got up exceedingly early, but he found it surprising that they hadn't spotted anyone. They hadn't even seen so much as a servant doing chores. The quiet was more than a little unsettling, but they thankfully made it without being seen. He and Byleth are silent as they select a horse for her to ride. Dmitri isn't sure how far she'd need to go, but he wanted to ensure her journey would be a swift one. It isn't until they are putting the saddle on that Byleth begins to speak. Once I'm gone you are going to need to be very careful. If Rhea even suspects what you've done, I don't even want to think about her reaction. I will endeavor to act normally. With any luck everyone will interpret his inevitable melancholy on Byleth's assumed previous departure. I will give Lady Rhea no cause to be suspicious. That's good. I don't know what her current mental state is, but given all she has lost I'm worried about how she will react when she realizes I am out of reach. All good points. Lady Rhea did not take the fall of Gareg Mach very well, and until their last discussion about it, her reactions to Edelgard being brought up were not the most encouraging. All too soon the saddle was firmly in place, and they were leading the horse towards the nearby forest. People would be less likely to hear anything if they walked some of the distance. Once they were far enough away, he and Byleth just stood there, waiting for something he couldn't name. It didn't matter though, Dmitri would take any excuse to spend even a few more seconds at Byleth's side. Suddenly Byleth turned to face him, a resolute look on her face. I need to say something before I do this, she began. I still don't know if I love you or not. I still don't think us pursuing a romantic relationship is a good idea. Despite all that, you've done a lot for me, and I don't know when we'll meet in person again. You deserve more than a simple goodbye and to watch me leave again. Before Dmitri can say anything, Byleth closes the distance between them. This kiss is much different from the one they shared in that cave so long ago. It is lighter somehow and less urgent. Regardless, it is indescribably wonderful to hold her again. It has been so long since he had the honor. All too soon though, Byleth steps away, puts on her cloak's hood, and mounts her horse. Stay safe. Dmitri then watches as she rides away. If he is lucky, he will hear something from her by the time his army reaches Inver. Now he just has to hope that no one suspects their ruse and that Byleth reunites with her mercenary group without issue. The boy is going to be fine. No one will have any reason to suspect him of sneaking you out. Byleth knows that logically, but Rhea can become a dragon and might be Suthi's daughter. She's not ready to rule anything out. That is a good point. The fact Dmitri can be very self-destructive does not put her mind at ease either. Then I can ensure Dmitri meets us in the throne room tonight, Suthis suggested. If he gets confirmation that you are safely with your father and the other mercenaries, it will put his mind at ease. He will keep his head above water as long as he knows you are safe and out there. That was true. Byleth shook her head in an effort to clear it. Dmitri would be fine. He had Felix, Didu, Rodrigue, and the others to look out for him. She needed to focus on herself. Her father was waiting for her, and he was probably very worried about her safety. Geralt should be about a day's ride away, so she would need to pay attention to her surroundings. There was still a chance that the men Rhea sent out could run into her. Byleth would have to be careful and keep her hood on. If she does cross paths with anyone she shouldn't, they won't be able to easily identify her. Once she meets up with Geralt, they will probably head to Leicester and work there for a while. Given Claude's desire to separate from the church, she should be safe there. Do you truly think dreams and letters will help you and the boy? I'm not sure, replied Byleth. It's better than nothing. I still don't know about me and Dimitri. Things have been better, but that doesn't mean we could last as a couple for a millennium or more. Making Dimitri live as long as her, just for them to go their separate ways, seems like the worst outcome to her. For a relationship to last you need many things. Love, trust, a feeling of security. She and Dimitri share an attraction and trust is being rebuilt, but Byleth just doesn't see a happy ending for them. And why is that? Dimitri is a king, and before you say anything I'm not just referring to our different social statuses. He loves his people and kingdom, I don't think he could ever bear to abandon them. It would eat him alive if he did. He already feels guilty enough for things that were not his fault. At the same time, I don't think either you or me would be happy with a life as his queen. Neither of them had particularly enjoyed their last visit to Fhirdiad. Things had gotten better, but it wasn't exactly fun either. That is quite the conundrum. For now, I think it might be for the best if we focused on other aspects of your relationship. Figuring out how you could be together should come up if you decide you wish to get back together. Suthies snorts. The boy has made it clear enough that he'll never stop loving you, so we know what his answer will be. Byleth supposes that makes sense. With this kind of thing, they will have to tackle problems as they become relevant. After seeing Byleth off, Dimitri immediately headed towards the training grounds. There is no way he can go back to sleep now. If anyone questions him, he can always claim to have had trouble sleeping. It happens often enough that no one should find it odd. He isn't sure what to make of that kiss. Their last one had been in the heat of the moment. It had just happened to both of their surprise. This time though, Byleth had intentionally. It did not mean that she wanted to be with him again. Byleth made that clear before she kissed him, so he doesn't want to get his hopes up, but it is difficult. His beloved allowed him to kiss her, to hold her, to feel a crumb of the love they once shared. Privileges he knows a boor like him doesn't deserve, but it was wonderful. Maybe things aren't so hopeless though. Byleth may not know if she loves him anymore, but she has to at least still find him attractive. She wouldn't have kissed him, either time, otherwise. She also seems to still enjoy his company, they wouldn't spar or share meals as often if she didn't. Dimitri can work with that. He isn't sure how, this is more Sylvain's area of expertise, but given time Dimitri is sure he can figure something out. Attraction and enjoying each other's company are decent first steps, he just needs to show her that they can have a good life together. Byleth sees Dimitri in the throne room that night. As soon as he catches sight of her, Dimitri rushes to her. Byleth. Are you okay? Did anyone see you? He stops short just as he reaches her and grasps her arms. Please tell me you reached your father. She is not surprised by his actions. If their positions were reversed, Byleth is certain she'd be frantic with worry too. I am fine Dimitri, no one saw me, and I am with my father. How are things at camp? Hopefully Rhea hadn't done anything after Byleth left. Preparations to march have continued and we should be leaving in a day or two. Everyone is fine, though Felix is very annoyed to have lost his favorite sparring partner. Dimitri chuckles. Didu is also fretting more than usual, he seems convinced that with you gone I will stop eating and sleeping entirely. Byleth doesn't necessarily think Didu is wrong to worry. What about you? Dimitri asks. What are your plans now that you are no longer with my army? Oh, and did your father see the men Lady Rhea sent out? We have a job lined up in Leicester. Her father had been looking since he left and was lucky to have found something so quickly. The deal had just been finalized when she caught up to them. My father wants us to remain there until word reaches us that Rhea is back at Garreg Mach. It seems like the safest course of action. Rhea is less likely to find them if they stay away from the kingdom, if only for a little while. Once we take a job or two, Gerald thinks it will be safe to go back to kingdom territory, or perhaps Adrestia if there are any decent jobs. If Dimitri succeeds and the war ends, there are bound to be many in Adrestia who could use a skilled band of mercenaries. That is good. Dimitri looks relieved. Perhaps by that time I might need reputable mercenaries for something. I cannot think of anything currently, but there will surely be something. Why does that not surprise her? To answer your second question, Byleth's father did have a run-in with people he believes were from the church, Suthies interjected from her throne. Nothing came from it, thankfully. A short discussion was had, nothing more. Byleth nodded. They claimed to want directions and only took a brief interest in everyone who was present. Though Eloise swears they seemed disgruntled when they realized there were no young women amongst the group. Hopefully that will keep Ria off your trail, at least for a little while. Dimitri finally let go of her arms and took a step back. I can only hope things calm soon so I can see you in person again. I do not like that you must hide, simply to feel safe. I am not fond of it either. Suthies looked away. To think a religion dedicated to me would cause such strife for one I care about. Byleth wished her friend wouldn't be so hard on herself. None of this is your fault. That is correct, Dimitri added. You died before the Church of Syros was founded and have never had a say in what was preached. I suppose. Byleth and Dimitri looked at each other in concern. She can understand why Suthies is upset, especially since Ria might really be Syros. They will just have to take everything one step at a time. Hopefully all three of them can continue to navigate through these troubled times. Chapter 42, Returning to Normal. Victory in Inver is swift. The people are demoralized, the army had already been diminished, and the remaining leaders cannot effectively rule after all the Agarthans have done. The fact that forces from Faerghus, the church, and Leicester were all present also meant they massively outnumber what parts of the army remained in Inver. There hadn't even been much of a fight. His forces had crashed through the gates and Dimitri had barely entered the city when soldiers and officials began surrendering left and right. It hadn't taken long to locate Edelgard. She was as he had last seen her, lost and confused. It was like she had regressed to when they had first met. The last time he had seen her, Dimitri had turned his back and walked away, but he couldn't bring himself to do so again. Byleth had been upset with him about doing that, but what's more, it bothered him as well. Dimitri had once blamed Edelgard for so much, and while she had committed atrocities, she was not guilty of everything he accused her of. Edelgard is still his stepsister and someone he once considered a dear friend. Dimitri isn't sure he could live with himself if he just walked away again. He wants to be a better man than that, for Byleth, his kingdom, his friends, and himself. It appears as though you were correct about the Emperor's mental state, said Lady Ria. It is like she is a child. The woman in question was being comforted by Mercedes. She looked to be close to tears. Byleth was correct, Edelgard would have preferred death to this. I will take her to Garreg Mach. Lady Ria's voice is cold. We should take this as a second chance to educate Emperor Wilhelm's descendant. Dimitri isn't sure he likes the sound of that. I would prefer to take my stepsister back to Fhirdiad. He hopes that someone at the School of Sorcery will be able to help her. Leaving her to live like this, it feels wrong. She deserves to know about her experiences, all that she has lost and gained in her lifetime. Anger spreads across the Archbishop's face. Do not fight me on this, you have been concealing much from me and I will not stand for more of it. Dimitri feels dread creep up his spine. The child can only be saved by the grace of the goddess, yet you wish to sequester her away. Lady Ria narrows her eyes and Dimitri could almost swear there are slits where her pupils should be. I can only wonder why you wish to keep her from salvation. I simply wish to help her. Dimitri needs to try to de-escalate the situation. Edelgard cannot remember ever having been in Garreg Mach but does have memories of Fhirdiad. It might put her more at ease and make things easier for everyone. Lady Ria's harsh look does not diminish. That is not all. I don't know why, but you have been keeping Geralt Eisner's daughter from me. I don't know what you are talking about. You know where she is. I want to know where she is and for her to be brought to me. Her tone became progressively colder. This is non-negotiable, Your Majesty. This is not good. I don't know where Geralt or Byleth Eisner currently are. That isn't even a lie. His beloved was so smart, she planned for this very situation. Even if I did know where she was, I do not own her. I do not make it a habit to demand the presence of those not officially affiliated with me. Geralt's mercenaries are no longer in my employ, I no longer have the right to tell her or any of them where to go. Dmitri dug his fingers into his leg. He needed to keep calm. If he escalates things at all, it will do him no good. Should Byleth Eisner wish to see you, I am sure she will seek you out. That answer doesn't seem to please Lady Rhea as she looks livid and about ready to lunge. Lady Rhea, what is going on? Dmitri has never been more relieved to see Seath in his life. Nothing, Seath, His Majesty and I were simply having a chat. Seath does not look convinced. Come, we have a few things to put in order. Dmitri knows things are not over but is thankful that at least that first conversation is done. He desperately desires to write to Byleth and warn her but does not wish to risk doing so right now. Lady Rhea is still in his camp, and even if he knew where she was, Dmitri doesn't want to take the chance that his letter would be followed. The Archbishop is already suspicious of him. Everything okay, Your Kingliness? Dmitri looked and saw Claude approaching him. What could he want? I was hoping we could continue the conversation we had in that dark vortex, Claude inquired. You know, before that creepy pale person tried to kill us. Of course. Dmitri had been wanting to speak with Claude about that anyway. Come with me, he said, gesturing towards his tent. This conversation was best kept private. The walk is a quiet one, but as soon as they are alone, a serious expression crosses Claude's face. I'm assuming you haven't forgotten our previous conversation, but my intent has not changed. I am still planning on getting the church out of Leicester and making changes happen to the Central Church's leadership. Claude looks more serious than Dmitri can ever remember seeing him. My only question is, what are you going to do when I start? That is a complicated matter. Before I can answer that, I have a question of my own. At Claude's nod, Dmitri continues. Should your plans come to fruition, how do you plan to help the people who rely on the church in their everyday lives? What do you mean? Claude cannot be serious, can he? That confused look on his face does not appear to be fake, but did Claude not investigate how the church impacted the common folk? Could he be as ignorant as Dmitri once was about such things? In both Fairgus and Leicester, the common folk are reliant on the church for education and healing. Dmitri had gone out of his way to confirm that what he saw while in Leicester with Byleth was not limited to that area. Many of them cannot afford advanced schooling or even doctors. Without the local churches and clergymen, many would suffer. Claude's eyes widen for a moment, before he schools his expression. I would do everything I could to support those people, but I think we may need to table this discussion for another time. Claude at least appears to be contemplative. I need to think over some things. That is a relief. Dmitri had been worried that Claude knew and simply didn't care. He knows Claude was not that callous, but it had still been in the back of his mind. If waiting for a day or so helped people have more security in the long run, Dmitri had no objections. News travels fast and Byleth feels some of her worries ease when word reaches her that the invasion of Inver had happened that morning and had been a success. The Emperor had been taken into custody too if the news was accurate. Byleth cannot help but wonder what Dmitri is planning on doing with his stepsister. He had been so dismissive of her in Garreg Mach after all. Would Dmitri send her away or perhaps let Rhea or Claude decide Edelgard's fate instead? Right now, her current job is to root out some bandits near Daphnel territory. Once that is done, Geralt's mercenaries are to guard a trading caravan for a couple of weeks. It was nice getting back to what used to be her normal life. There was less pressure, no hovering, love-struck kings, no monitoring everything she said so those around her wouldn't be suspicious of her knowledge. She was still working, but things were less stressful on her end. Byleth just needed to swing her sword around as required until their contract was up. She wasn't even fighting every day. It is much more relaxing, being away from the war front. The bandits are also less skilled than the Adrestian soldiers, so even the battles have been easier. Our change in scenery has also given me more time to think about a few factors. Suthies sounded a bit hesitant. Oh. I have been putting thought into what you said to me about confronting Rhea. I don't feel ready yet, but I know I cannot put it off forever. Suthies huffs. Nor do I wish to. If it would make Suthies feel better, they could always try to figure out Rhea's mental state first. She was manic when they first rescued her from Inver after the previous war, and while Rhea did calm down soon enough, the way she looked at Byleth afterwards. Everyone said the Archbishop had gone back to normal, but Byleth now believes she had simply went back to hiding. If their theories are correct, Byleth is the fruition at a 1,000-year plan. Seeing that plan come to an end, for good or ill is bound to have an effect. If Rhea seems calm, they can try to see her, if not they stay away. That is a reasonable idea. We are already uneasy, and your safety and freedom are more important than Rhea. Suthies shakes her head. I refuse to put you in danger, especially for a woman who at the very least seems okay with sacrificing a life to resurrect someone. My memories are still not complete, but I am certain I made it very clear that I had no desire to be brought back. With the war now finally over, everyone is heading home, though a few people are remaining in Inber to help sort things out. Dimitri specifically requested that Mercedes remain. She was born in the Empire after all, and Claude is leaving behind Lawrence too. There are others staying as well, but they are the most prominent. As Dimitri finishes putting all his things together, his mind, like always, drifts to Byleth. Is she doing well? They hadn't shared any dreams since the night after she left, and it hasn't been long enough for a letter to have reached him. There is no reason for his beloved to not be okay, but he cannot help but worry. Dimitri just has to get used to being away from her again. Having her at camp, always within arm's reach, made him greedy. This was always going to happen, he knew that. It might not have been under the best of circumstances, but Byleth was always going to leave. Sure, Dimitri had fantasies of her staying and them never being apart again, but they were just that, fantasies. Knock, knock. Dimitri turned and saw Claude standing in his doorway. Do you have a minute? We are going to be leaving soon, and I'd like to finish our previous conversation in person. That makes sense. Claude wouldn't want to risk any letters between them being read. Especially about the sensitive matters of which they'd been speaking of. I have some time. He was actually eager to see what Claude had to say, given what Dimitri had told him previously. I still need to do some investigating, but from what I have already found, what you said about the people's reliance on the church seems accurate. If what you said is true, I do admit, I might need to re-evaluate a few things. That was good to hear. Even with that in mind, I do admit to agreeing with a number of your points about how the church is in need of change. My biggest grievance is that I do not wish to make the citizens suffer because of my personal feelings towards the church. Dimitri wants to improve the lives of the people, not make them more difficult. While some of your previous points are sound, I fear the consequences would outweigh the benefits. Claude nods. There has to be some way to come up with a compromise. As far as I can tell, the church itself does a lot of good, but the power it has over governments is the problem. He scratches the back of his head. If we can find a way to diminish that, while still keeping the church running, something could be worked out for all of us. Dimitri can see the merits of that idea. Change does need to happen. While that could work, it would likely take years to figure something out, let alone implement any plan. Would you be satisfied with waiting? Claude does seem eager for change after all. I'm not exactly happy with the time frame, but nothing will ever happen if we don't start. Perhaps this would be a good opportunity to bring up a change Dimitri has been wanting to put in place. If I may, there is something I'd like to bring up. At Claude's curious look, Dimitri continues, I wish to put the hero's relics to rest. I cannot explain anything in full, but I know their origins and cannot even begin to describe how bad it is. Are you saying the history the church teaches is wrong? Claude looks suspicious, and rightfully so. How did you come by that information? If Dimitri hadn't been told the truth by his beloved and the goddess herself, Dimitri would find the information suspect as well. Apologies, but I cannot reveal my source. For what it is worth, I trust them completely. You know, Claude said thoughtfully, Hilda has complained more than once that Free Kugel is creepy. Dimitri cannot bring himself to say the words, but perhaps if he leads Claude to the answer, the other man will be more likely to believe it. Look at your own weapon. He gestures at Fail not on Claude's back, the structure, the material, even how it feels in your hands. With a skeptical look, Claude does as requested and runs his hands over the ancient bow. Now that I really think about it, it almost looks like bone. Dimitri can only look away in shame. It made sense, it still does, to not tell anyone, but he was still letting his friends and comrades use the bones of the fallen as weapons. It is a disgusting thought. His silence must be impactful as Claude's eyes widen and he drops the bow. The clanging of it hitting the ground rings throughout the tent. Is this why you never use Eredbar? Once I found out, just looking at my family's lance fills me with dread. I can barely touch it without feeling ill. What should be a sacred memento of his father has only become a tainted reminder of his family's brutality. Ah, since we are on the subject, I did once come across the weapon meant for Mary Ann's crest, but I couldn't bear to carry it, so I had it cremated. I apologize if that was presumptuous, but I couldn't stand the idea of someone's remains collecting dust in the back of some convoy. Claude doesn't quite look like he believes him. And how did you come across something like that? Dimitri cannot just tell Claude about Maurice, he has already told him many impossible things. I met someone who also bared the same crest, he gave it to me on his deathbed. I suppose I was in the right place, at the right time. His life had been so difficult, I could not leave him to die alone. The vast majority of Maurice's life had been in isolation, Dimitri couldn't imagine him and Byleth letting him die like that too. It shouldn't take me too long to confirm your claims, but if that happens, I do have some ideas on how to change things, Claude said once he shook off the various revelations. Adrestia has fallen, so perhaps all three of our forces can walk away with more land or resources. The church can have more than just Gareg Mach, while its power is lessened in government. He claps his hands together. Churches will still exist but will be run more locally. Gareg Mach will still exist, the central church will still exist, they will just have less power in Faerghus and Leicester. We just need to figure out the how. Dimitri isn't sure if more land or recourses are what the church wants, but they need to offer something if they intend to take some of the church's power away. That could work. Dimitri hadn't considered doing such a thing before. That would certainly diminish the church's presence in government, without completely changing things and disrupting an untold number of people's lives. The church would certainly lose power in some respects but would gain some in other areas. Dimitri would have to discuss this with Byleth, she was bound to have some ideas to share. It would take some doing, Claude acknowledges, but we can probably sell people on that if we backed it up somehow. What is going on here? Dimitri nearly jumps when they shout erupts from his tent's entrance. He turns and sees Lady Rhea glaring at them. She was seething. How dare you plot to betray the church? You are insignificant in the shadow of the goddess, and you would dare betray her. Lady Rhea slowly approaches them. You owe the Church of Ceros everything. Neither of your lands would be what they are today without it. One would think after watching the destruction of Adrestia you would see how disastrous it is to turn from the goddess. That is not what is happening, Lady Rhea. This is bad, what was she even doing here? With Adrestia's fall and the Emperor's capture, the political landscape of Fodlan is going to change. Claude and I were just discussing different paths we could take. What would be best for Fodlan and its people? Lady Rhea does not look placated. Is that so? Because it sounds like you are planning on doing away with the church in Leicester and Faerghus. We were discussing diminishing your presence in the government, yes, but not doing away with the church altogether. Claude's words had about as much of a calming effect as Dimitri's. Not only that, but there was a look in the Archbishop's eyes that Dimitri recognized. It was the same look Lady Rhea had when she demanded he hand over Byleth after her first time in Zaris. Byleth had been missing for days afterward and had later told him she'd woken up at least once but had been put back to sleep. She had also distinctly recalled being in the Archbishop's lap. Dimitri can understand why Lady Rhea would be upset, but he needs to find a way to make her see reason. If he could, not only would it benefit the people of Faerghus and Leicester, but it might make things safer for Byleth as well. He just needs the Archbishop to calm down. Chapter 43, Old Scars. Please Lady Rhea, I realize how this must sound but ... Silence. Dimitri is stunned into compliance. He had never heard the Archbishop use that tone before. You are both ungrateful children. Claude held up his hands placatively. Dimitri and I are just talking about possibilities, nothing is set in stone. No one is intending to disrespect the church or goddess. We just think the reliance on things like crests and heroes' relics are not sustainable. Edelgard, for all her faults, saw that. There was truth in that. Dmitri knows that the path she chose to walk on was not a good one, but his stepsister wasn't wrong about everything. Do not bring up that girl's wicked deeds. I'm not defending what Edelgard did. Her army has caused devastation everywhere, but things became stagnated, and people were suffering for it. Claude's words resonate with Dmitri. He cannot help but think of Sylvain and Ingrid in particular. Unfortunately, Lady Rhea doesn't seem to agree. Her face had not lost its cold expression. Lady Rhea and Claude then begin arguing, and the back and forth is so fast that Dmitri cannot even begin to follow what they are saying. He can't even get a word in edgewise. It is then that it happens. In anger, Lady Rhea bangs her hand on one of the tent's support beams and it cracks. Dmitri barely has a moment to marvel that someone other than him has the strength to do that when things start to come crashing down. Dmitri is able to grab Claude, the person standing nearest to him, and throw him towards the entrance when something smacks him in the face. When the world rights itself, Claude is helping him up while Seath and Rodrigue are pulling Lady Rhea away. Luckily the Archbishop looks to be unhurt. Dmitri can feel something warm dripping down his face, and it is difficult to concentrate enough to see everything that is happening. His head is also in a not so small amount of pain. Duke Regan, Rodrigue says, please take His Majesty to a healer. Dmitri can feel someone helping him move. Of course. Come on Dmitri, let's get you out of here. On wobbly legs, Claude leads him to Marianne. Oh goddess, lay him down here. Dmitri can feel the change in position, but between the pain and disorientation he cannot concentrate on anything. The next thing he knows, Dmitri is sitting up and he can feel someone's hands on his face. All he knows is that it's not Byleth who's with him. He'd recognize her touch anywhere. Your Majesty, can you hear me? King Dmitri, please respond. There is a gentle warmth on his face from, heal? Recover maybe? It's when he feels his shoulder being shaken that Dmitri is finally able to open his eyes again. Claude is gently shaking his shoulder on one side of the bed he's sitting in, while Marianne is on the other. Her hand is glowing with faith magic. What happened? He remembers the tent going down and feeling disoriented, but surely that doesn't warrant the worried looks they are giving him. His head still hurts, and the world looks slightly off-kilter for some reason. You are going to be all right, King Dmitri. Marianne looks too upset for that to be all there is to the situation. What do you remember? Dmitri tries to sit up a little straighter, but moving causes a flash of pain to go through his face. Claude and I were talking, Lady Rhea interrupted us, one of the tent's support beams was damaged, and everything came down. After that Rodrigue asked Claude to take me to a healer. I'm afraid everything after that is a blur. I remember moving, but not much else. That's good, your memory doesn't have any gaps in it. Claude grasped his shoulder. You pushed me out before the tent collapsed. Thanks for that. It was no problem, I'm just sorry I couldn't get myself or Lady Rhea out in time as well. King Dmitri, there is another thing, Marianne cut in. It's your eye. I was able to save the eye itself and heal the skin around it, but I'm not sure if your sight will recover. Oh. That would explain why things looked a little different. Truthy, he hadn't really noticed. I'm sorry that this happened. Claude clenched his fists. If things hadn't escalated maybe. Dmitri sighed. I really don't mind, Claude. I am just happy you were not injured as well. This honestly wasn't a wholly terrible thing. He'd gotten so used to fighting with one eye before that his battle prowess wasn't where he wanted it to be even after years of training. Maybe there would be improvement now. Byleth, and Felix for that matter, would certainly appreciate a better sparring partner. The circumstances of losing his eye this time were also better. The injury was the result of an accident in helping someone, not from being brutalized as a prisoner. Furthermore, Marianne said the eye and the skin around it was still intact, so it is probably a prettier sight than the previous injury. He'll have to get used to the lack of depth perception again, but he did it once, there's no reason he can't do it again. Excuse me, they all looked up and saw Seath standing before them. Marianne beat a hasty retreat. I wanted to apologize for what happened. The Archbishop wanted to do so as well, but we thought given the circumstances, the three of you being in the same enclosed space was not the wisest of ideas. Claude relaxed and sat back down in his previous chair. Yeah, it's probably for the best that the three of us not be together for a little while. Lady Rhea is being taken back to Garreg Mach. I assure you, we plan on evaluating her mental state. Seath pauses for a moment. If it is not an imposition given His Majesty's injuries, I would like to know what happened from your point of view. I have already heard quite enough of Lady Rhea's. The older man put his full attention on Dimitri. I am also deeply apologetic for what happened to your King Dimitri. If you would like to come to Garreg Mach, we could offer you some of our best healers. The ones that we brought are likely too exhausted and drained from the invasion to do any better than Miss Von Edmund's skilled handiwork. He looked down at the floor for a moment before looking up again. I will ensure reparations are made and that Rhea will not avoid consequences. The war has not been kind to her psyche. Should someone whose mental state is delicate, even if it is just temporarily, be in such a high position? At Seath's harsh gaze, Claude holds up his hands. All I'm saying is that if she's dealing with trauma, being in a position of power and making all sorts of important decisions likely isn't helping. I cannot argue with your words. Seath suddenly looks tired. The war has had an effect on us all. He sighed, but please, back to the matter at hand, what is your side of what happened? Seath only looks more tired as he and Claude explain their conversation. Dimitri keeps some of the information vague, such as Claude's pervious desire for the church to not have a presence in Leicester. That would just overly complicate matters. Please understand, Dimitri asserted, we were only speaking in hypotheticals when Lady Rhea burst in. As Claude pointed out to her, change is coming regardless of what we do. Exactly, Claude interjected. It would be better to get in front of it, than to be swept away with it. Seath doesn't look happy, but at least he doesn't look angry like Lady Rhea did. I may not agree with all of your points, but I do see the merit in what you are saying. He rubs the area between his eyes. Given everything that has happened today, I believe it would be best if we reconvene about this at a later date. King Dimitri should have time to rest and recover, and this discussion would benefit from cooler heads. Dimitri leans back in the bed. That sounds like a reasonable request. Yeah, I can agree to that. Seath nods to them and departs, after wishing him a swift recovery. As soon as they are alone again, Claude sits next to Dimitri. Thanks again, though I am sorry helping me cost you an eye. Think nothing of it. Dimitri really isn't bothered by the situation. I would feel worse if I had done nothing. Besides, better one of us gets hurt than both of us. Now that he thinks about it, having them both hurt so soon after Adrestia's fall, and the Emperor's capture would have likely caused some form of chaos. You know, Claude said with a sly grin, this might not be so bad for you. And why is that? Claude's smile turns into a smirk. Mercenaries probably like scars. Who knows, maybe the Ashen Demon will find you more attractive this way. We're not, she wouldn't. Byleth certainly didn't have a problem with his eye patch before, but that by no means meant. Claude erupted with laughter at Dimitri's blushing face. All you have to do is find her again. She'll probably throw herself at you. Dimitri can feel his already intense blush spreading. Even if she and I were, like that, she is not so shallow that a new scar would make much of a difference. Though maybe now that he looked a bit more like his old self, his beloved would be more at ease. Either way, Byleth, and Suthies for that matter, would not be happy when he has to explain what happened. Say Byleth, did you hear about what happened just before everyone left in Bear after the invasion? Byleth looked up from where she was sharpening her sword and saw Eloise standing above her. I heard the invasion went well and the Emperor was captured, but that is all. Could something have happened to Dimitri or the others? Eloise sits down next to her. If the rumors are true, there was an incident. The Archbishop reportedly attacked King Dimitri and Duke Claude. I couldn't say why, but I was told someone got hurt. He puts a hand on her shoulder. I know you and Dimitri spent time together while we were working for him. He's always been a nice boy, and he was getting rather good at fishing. Maybe we should ask Gerald to take a job closer to the kingdom, so we can check in on things. That would be nice. I am sorry if this upsets you, but I thought you'd like to know. Eloise pats her shoulder again, then gets up and leaves. Did Dimitri get hurt? He was fighting in a war, there was always the risk he would get hurt or worse, but she never imagined that after the fighting was over. What I'd like to know is why the Archbishop would attack those boys. Suthies shook her head. What could she have been thinking? They were allies, and with the way things are in Fodlan right now, it can only lead to more problems. Unless they find a way to control the narrative that is. But what if this was their fault? That Rhea was either suspicious or knew that Dimitri helped her get away and attacked in retaliation. Even if that wasn't the case, Byleth cannot even comprehend the potential fallout to the Archbishop attacking the two remaining leaders of Fodlan. Especially so soon after invading Inver. I can scarcely imagine all the consequences myself. Suthies sounded worried. I assure you though, I will make it so that you and the boy share a dream tonight. We can find out what happened straight from the source and make sure he is okay. Admittedly, I'm rather worried myself. At least it wasn't only Byleth. She can only hope Dimitri and Claude are okay. Fodlan wouldn't last, not as it had been, if the leader of the church did any serious harm to them. Byleth really hopes that Dimitri is okay. Byleth has never been so relieved to see Dimitri appear in the throne room. The sight of the eye patch does make her freeze though, and she can hear Suthies' gasp behind her. Please do not be alarmed, Dimitri says quickly. It is not as serious as last time, and I truly have no regrets regarding how I obtained the injury. Some of the healers even think my sight might return with time. Byleth cannot stop herself from rushing over and burying herself in his chest. Dimitri's arms immediately move around her. He is probably ecstatic about them embracing, but Byleth doesn't have the mental capacity to be annoyed at the moment. Is this her fault? Did Dimitri get hurt because he protected her? I am fine, Byleth, I promise. Dimitri's arms tighten around her for a moment. In fact, given how long I spent without the eye, this feels more natural. I actually consider myself fortunate that it was the same eye. Byleth supposes that makes sense, in a warped kind of way. But if Dimitri was fine with his injury, she had no reason to complain. I do worry though, that the loss of my eye might make me less approachable. Byleth took a step back to get a good look at him. It certainly made me look more menacing last time. There was some truth in that, it had certainly surprised her when they reunited. Though, Byleth is reasonably sure that it was his darker attitude that had kept most away. Either way, Byleth never thought the eye patch diminished his looks. I think the eye patch suits you rather well. It was nostalgic now that she considers it. A blush spreads across his face. I am inclined to agree, Suthies' voice reminds them of her presence. You do look rather good with the eye patch, though I do hope your eye eventually heals. Perhaps once some time has passed, I can see if my magic will do you any good. Dimitri approaches the throne and bows. Thank you, Suthies, I appreciate your concern. Byleth walks to Dimitri's side and puts a hand on his shoulder. Could you please tell us what happened? Alois told me that he heard a rumor about Rhea attacking you and Claude. Yes, it was rather startling. Clearly the rumor had some accuracy. Dimitri sighed. As I was getting ready to march home, Claude approached me. We were talking about the reforms he wanted to put in place and the possible repercussions of doing so. As Dimitri continues explaining what happened, Byleth can feel dread wash over her. While it is a relief to hear that what happened to Dimitri's eye was the result of an accident, the circumstances around it were still worrying. She is happy that Claude came to realize his plan was more than a little flawed, but Rhea's actions. Do you know what Rhea was doing outside your tent in the first place? Suthies asked. I doubt she just happened to be walking by. With all the chaos and being rushed to the infirmary, I didn't actually see Lady Rhea again. He shook his head. I saw Seath a few times, but they left before I was cleared to leave the infirmary. Suthies nodded. They were likely trying to avoid another confrontation. Probably, I plan on demanding a meeting of some sort soon. Rumors of what happened have already gotten out and I'd like to be more prepared for the inevitable panic. Dimitri reached for her hand. Byleth let him. Quite honestly, Lady Rhea seemed rather crazed. I have to agree with Seath. I think the war and loss of Gareg Mach, temporary as it was, rattled her mentally. Perhaps overhearing Claude's and my conversation pushed her over the edge. That might not be all there is. There are a few things they had neglected to tell Dmitri that he needed to know. You already know about our theory on Ria's plan for me. A dark look crossed Dmitri's face, so Byleth quickly continued, the fact that she wasn't even able to see me while Geralt's mercenaries were in your employ probably added to things. Suthies nodded. Can you imagine having a plan in the works for over 20 years, thinking it failed for most of them, then suddenly having another chance, then once again it slips through your fingers? Suthies let out a dark chuckle. It's enough to drive anyone mad. Suthies, her friend had been taking the situation with Ria rather hard lately and Byleth couldn't help but be worried. She unconsciously gripped Dmitri's hand tighter, and he responded in kind. Byleth wants to tell Dmitri everything, he is the only person who they really could share it with. There is another thing, it is difficult to even begin to explain though. Take your time. Dmitri looked concerned. I do not wish to cause you any distress. Suthies take a deep breath, but still seems at a loss. Byleth releases Dmitri's hand and climbs the stairs, choosing to sit against her friend's legs. Touch always seems to help Dmitri, maybe it will help Suthies too. Suthies looks at her for a moment, before turning back to Dmitri. For a while now, I've suspected that Ria is not quite who she says she is. As we've told you before, Nabateans live very long lives. Provided they did not die from an accident or, otherwise, her expression became pained at this, my children could easily still be alive today. Byleth can see comprehension dawn on Dmitri's face. Siros was not a saint I imparted knowledge or guidance to. She was my daughter, in fact, all the saints were Nabateans. They did not perish in Xanadu and set out to stop Nemesis and his Agarthan allies. That makes sense, as they had crests to pass down. Dmitri looked uncomfortable. Though I imagine their crests were gained through less brutal means than mine. Suthies nodded. I do not know this for a fact, but I think Ria might actually be Siros. They look very much alike, and it would explain why she seems so set on seeing me resurrected, despite me being vocal about not wanting such a thing. Byleth has to turn away and close her eyes. That whole plan will never be okay. I'm not sure what to say. How could we even begin to see if you are correct? Dmitri is beginning to look distressed. Though it does put a number of things into perspective, like why the church is so slow to change. The same person has probably been in charge the entire time. That makes sense to Byleth. Dmitri can probably relate to what Ria might be going through. He was haunted by the deaths of those he cared about for a very long time. The only way we could think of is for me to go see Ria, but that would put you in danger. Dmitri's eyes became stony, which is not an acceptable solution. They all sat in silence for a little while. Eventually we will have to confront her, Suthies said. It would be better to get at least one looming threat out of the way. I am just not ready for such a thing yet. Byleth looked back at Suthies. Her friend was in a truly unenviable position. To be so close to family, while fearing what they will do to someone you care about. She cannot imagine how difficult it all must be. For all her issues with her father hiding things from her, Byleth knows he would always put her first and never do anything to hurt her or trample all over her desires. And you shouldn't force yourself to confront anyone until you are comfortable doing so. Dmitri's voice was soft. While I would love for Byleth to be safer, I also want you to be comfortable. Thank you for telling me. They would all likely need some time to process everything. Alois told me earlier he'd try to convince Geralt to take a job in the kingdom. He was worried about you and wanted to see if the rumors about someone being injured were true. Byleth wouldn't mind going to Faerghus, even if she knows now that Dmitri is fine. Given the circumstances, my father is likely to agree. He likes you and will probably be similarly worried. Dmitri lit up at that. That would be wonderful. I will endeavor to find work to offer you if you do come. Byleth has no doubts that he will have several prospective jobs at the ready when they next meet. I will also start sending you letters now that I know you're on your way back to Fhirdiad. Byleth did promise after all. I look forward to reading them. Chapter 44, Ends and Beginnings. Dmitri and Byleth send letters when they can. It can be difficult with Geralt's mercenaries rarely staying in one place for very long, but they manage. Dmitri always makes sure to provide them with at least a few options for jobs when they travel near Tverdyad. It never felt like quite enough, but Dmitri doubted anything other than Byleth always being with him would be satisfactory. "Your Majesty," Dida said while approaching him, "this letter just arrived for you." When Dmitri saw the familiar seal, he dropped the reports he was reading about the situation in Srang to open it. "Thank you for bringing this to me so quickly." He can barely contain the urge to rip open the envelope. Dida gives him a knowing smile, before exiting Dmitri's office. Whenever a letter from Byleth arrives, Dmitri will inevitably drop whatever he is doing so he can read it in private. Sometimes they are short and to the point, including information about something Byleth thinks he'd find useful or telling him where she can be reached for however many weeks or moons. Other times, they are longer with her detailing what she'd been up to recently or any thoughts she and Suthies wish to share. He is forever looking forward to receiving a new letter. He knows he is being utterly transparent, but Dmitri cannot help it. This particular letter is no different. Byleth's current job is going well, and she recently found a lake filled with fish. She, Captain Geralt, and Eloise were spending all their downtime acquiring food from it. She always sounded so excited when talking about food, and he loved that about her. He loved her letters in general. They let him see all sorts of different sides of Byleth. Each new letter brought so many potential new insights. He'll need to go to the garden before he can pen his reply. The only issue as far as Dmitri is concerned is that he cannot send letters anywhere near as often. Though his advisors have been getting suspicious and he knows it is only a matter of time before they start pushing for him to get married. At least his friends are on his side. More than one of them has picked up on his feelings for Byleth, and whenever someone brings up the topic of his eventual marriage, they are quick to change the subject. Dmitri knows this cannot last forever, but once he and Byleth figure things out they can come up with a solution. He just needs to hold on a little longer. Byleth blushes as she puts down Dmitri's most recent letter. She has no idea how he managed to get it to her so quickly. She had just barely told him where she was in the Ordolia region. Honestly, she can appreciate his enthusiasm, but his kingdom would benefit from him not dropping everything the second she was involved. "You say that like you don't keep a stack of his letters securely in your pack," Suthies said with a laugh. "You always get so excited when you receive them too." Byleth huffed. It would be rude to just throw them into the fire. And she knows Dmitri. He has admitted to her that he's rushed out in the middle of meetings, important ones, because someone told him a letter from her had arrived or there was word that she was in the area. It's not like they never saw each other. Her mercenary band goes by Tverdyad at least a couple times a year, and they always take advantage of that to plan their next invasion of Shamhala. They were both determined not to let this one end poorly. Geralt had already accepted a contract in Faerghus. They would be seeing each other in a couple of moons at most. Sure, it was in Frildarius lands, and not closer to Tverdyad, but she had no doubt Dmitri would appear at some point. Going to Tverdyad still wasn't too enjoyable, since many of the older lords continued to dislike her. The citizens had warmed up to her though, and seeing Dmitri was worth it. They couldn't do much without being crowded, but he always put effort into finding something fun for them to do. The last time they were together he took her to 5 different bakeries, and they ate until even she was full. It was nice to learn about what sweets he preferred as a child. The time before that, he took her on a tour of the city. Byleth had seen everything before, but Dmitri had been so excited to see all the improvements, and during that excursion the citizens were not glaring at her or talking about how she was a threat to the king. Besides, they eventually left the city limits to go ice fishing. On the occasions that he can travel outside of Faerghus to wherever she happens to be, Byleth tries to scout out good and relaxing fishing spots. Dmitri had gotten much better at fishing and always seemed to like it when she found a nice scenic spot for them. Sometimes she can even convince him to nap. He always looks so peaceful. And Byleth doesn't think she'll ever forget the time Dmitri's advisors thought he would benefit from a vacation. Instead of going to the Rhodos coast, he tracked down Geralt's mercenaries and spent weeks traveling with them, pretending to be a member. Byleth was flabbergasted, while Geralt thought it was hilarious and delighted in assigning Dmitri all kinds of chores. For some odd reason, Dmitri seemed pleased by that. "Well, what did the boy say?" Byleth turned back to the letter. He's excited to hear that Geralt accepted Felix's job offer and promises to come see us while we are in the area. Sothis laughs. An unsurprising response. Edelgard is doing well in the Rhodos coast. The place Edelgard had been since Dimitri took custody of her after keeping her in Fhirdiad proved problematic. He visited her recently and she seemed happy enough. That is good to hear. I fear she may never fully recover from what Thales did to her, but with time more of her memories should come back to her. Byleth hoped that was true. Dimitri had told her previously that his stepsister could remember some of their time at the officers' academy. She had accompanied Dimitri once to the estate Edelgard was residing in, and the other girl hadn't remembered her at all, despite them meeting multiple times while Geralt's mercenaries were part of her army. He also says he hopes we share a dream soon, as it has been so long since we've shared a memory. They still meet in the throne room with some regularity, especially when she and or Sothis had news they needed to immediately share. Now that she thought about it though, Byleth couldn't remember the last time she and Dimitri dreamed of a memory. Those are likely tapering off as we catch up to where you were when you invaded Shamhala. The talks with Claude and Archbishop Seath have also been going well. He hasn't figured out how to broach the subject of the true origins of crests, but Dimitri says he's working on it. It had been a surprise when the news of Ria's retirement reached them. Though Byleth is not convinced that Ria won't reclaim the position within a few decades or so once she can change her name and likely alter her appearance to some degree. For now though, things have settled down. We were all lucky that news of Ria stepping down spread so quickly. The boy is well loved and with how important the church is, I fear there would have been massive upheavals otherwise. Hopefully negotiations go well. A lot of people will benefit from some of those reforms. Dimitri had been particularly passionate about the education-based ones. Seath seems to be more open to changes than he was during their last conference and Claude has been less vehement about altering things since he started personally researching the church and its history. Their scheming friend had even tracked her down a couple of times to ask her a few questions. That is good to hear. I'm proud of much of what the church has done, but its stagnation has led to the same in Fodlan itself. Byleth had to agree with her friend's sentiments. As she put the letter with the others, Byleth carefully took out the customary pressed flower. More often than not Dimitri would include one in his letters. This time it was a pink camellia, while the last one was a cornflower. Byleth feels bad that she never sends anything with her letters but had been unable to think of anything that could be placed in the letter as it traveled. Dimitri had assured her that the letters brought him immeasurable joy on their own though. To make up for it, she tried to bring him something whenever they met in person. He did seem to love that Zoltan lance you brought him last time. Byleth isn't sure if she can top that, but they'll have to see what they can find before they reach Faerghus. He better have liked it. You spent an hour looking for it in that one weapons stall, Sothis huffed. I realize it was a rare find, but you do not need to spend hours looking whenever the opportunity presents itself. Honestly, it feels like you spend more time looking for something to give him than you do searching for food. She doesn't look for something to send to Dimitri that often. There are multiple lances, whetstones, and pairs of riding boots stashed in the convoy that say otherwise. Byleth can feel a blush spreading across her face. I just want to meet his efforts. I promised to try, and Dimitri's letters are always so nice. He paid a lot of attention to the things she wrote and was always so interested in the things she was doing and seeing. Frankly, her letters seemed more like reports, especially when compared to his thoughtfully written ones. Besides, some regions had unique whetstones that she knew he'd at least find fascinating. Byleth was admittedly less interested in the politics Dimitri would discuss, but she loved how passionate and driven he sounded and how proud he was when one of his reforms or new laws worked out. It was nice to read about his excitement. Getting those letters was always the highlight of her day, and for all her annoyance at some of his antics, Byleth looks forward to every opportunity they have to see each other. Dimitri has been thinking long and hard about extending his life. It is difficult, but he has tried to extract his love for Byleth from the equation. He needs to figure out if he could handle the consequences without being blinded by his love for one person. His beloved has warned him on multiple occasions that there are drawbacks to her lifespan. The most prominent two being losing all his friends and loved ones, and eventually having to leave his kingdom. Dmitri and Byleth had discussed numerous hypothetical situations should they chose to walk together for millennia. She and Suthies hope that if she shares a bit of her blood with him, blood that carries the goddess's own crest, it might evolve his crest into a major one. Just a small amount though, as they are worried that too much could cause him harm. From there they could do the mating ceremony and he could then begin the long process of setting things up in Faerghus so he could leave. Would he be happy living so long, knowing he would always watch any friend he made grow old and die, all while he stayed physically the same? Could he live with watching Sylvain, Ingrid, Felix, Didu, and all the rest grow old and die and then go on to watch the same in their children, grandchildren, and beyond? Then there was his people. He could spend the next few decades or so preparing things for his departure, but Dmitri knows himself. Even if he set things up perfectly so his people no longer needed him and he could retire, Dmitri would still likely feel guilt for leaving when he could theoretically stay. Walking with Byleth meant giving up quite a bit, something he once asked of her. Dmitri still had no memories of what happened after his first coronation and the events leading up to their invasion of Shambhala, but he could remember what happened after Edelgard fell with more clarity. Byleth had been tired, and it wasn't just the exhaustion they were all feeling. He remembers the others recovering from the war as the days went by, he recalls feeling better himself. His beloved though, her eyes never lost their previous exhaustion. She lit up when they were together, he knows she was happy to be with him, but she should have been happy all the time, not just when she was with him. Byleth deserved so much more than that. There were still ways they could be openly together in the near future, but it would take careful planning. Geralt's mercenaries were highly renowned in Faerghus after the war ended, they never had a shortage of job offers when they were in the kingdom, and the Ashen Demon was regarded highly by the common folk. Many of the lords would still kick up a fuss if an engagement was announced, but time was on his side. Many of the older lords would be replaced by their children soon enough, and with new people replacing the western lords there would be less opposition to Byleth being his queen. Even if that were to happen though they would still need to eventually depart. Byleth would not visibly age, and if things worked out for them, neither would he. They wouldn't rule forever, so ultimately the challenges would be the same. Should Byleth become his queen though, she would be giving up a lot while agreeing to undergo many hardships. Dmitri can accept nothing less himself if he wants their relationship to remain healthy. Having Byleth at his side if his lifespan is increased, would certainly vastly improve things, but that wasn't necessarily permanent. She had once brought up the possible eventuality that in 1,000 years or more they could simply grow apart, or there could be circumstances that required them to live apart for a time. Dmitri needs to be confident that he can live, at least for a little while, without his beloved at his side. Byleth makes everything better, but he cannot let her become a crutch. To be worthy enough to stand at her side, Dmitri needs to stand on his own 2 feet. Are you sure you want to do this? There is no rush, we have all the time in the world. I know, but I cannot hold off on this forever. Suthies looked resolutely ahead. I want to move past this, for both our sakes. Byleth nodded and walked into Xanadu. If what they heard was correct, Rhea should be here. This is where she went to live before as well, so Byleth had no reason to think the information was faulty. Dmitri would probably be upset she and Suthies did this without him, but if Suthies wanted to do this now, they would do it now. Hopefully they wouldn't get attacked during this visit to the Red Canyon. It took less time than Byleth thought it would to find Rhea. After so long spent hiding and avoiding the woman, it felt strange to just walk up to her. She'll get a few words and then Suthies can take over. Hopefully, things will not escalate and then she and Suthies can move on with their lives. Your feelings are important too, Byleth. If for even a second you feel like you are in danger, we can leave. In fact, I insist upon it. It was a comfort to know how much Suthies cared. Rhea was watering some flowers when they got close enough for her to hear their approach. In normal circumstances the smile that spread across the woman's face would have been a pleasant sign. It just put Byleth on edge. My child, it is wonderful to see you. Rhea's eyes searched her face. Would you happen to be Geralt Eisner's child? Yes. Rhea closes her eyes, and Byleth is certain she can hear a whispered finally. It is only when Rhea steps forward, arms reaching out for a hug, that Byleth backs away. Rhea's eyes widen for a moment, but she recovers quickly. Come, There is much that we need to discuss. Much that you need to know. If it's about you putting Suthisa's creststone in my chest, I am already well aware. Byleth is in no mood to play games, she wants to get this over with. That seemed to surprise Rhea. Her mouth was gaping open, and her eyes had widened. You know. A smile spread across her face. Then you realize who you are, and what responsibilities you have. Rhea tried for a hug again and Byleth responded by swiftly moving to the side. Why won't you let me near you? Rhea looked truly astonished. It has been so long since we have been together, and with the goddess amongst us again things can finally get better. We can be together again and deal with those who have disrespected you. Please let us embrace once more, I have missed you so much. Does she really not see the difference between her and Suthis? She might not. Suthisa's voice was eerily calm. She might actually think you are me. But why? Rhea knows they haven't sat on the throne and merged. She has no reason to think there is no Byleth anymore. I don't know you, why would I be comfortable with you hugging me? Please let this not go down the path she thought it was going. You are the goddess, you know me. Rhea's voice had a frantic edge. You must know me, you are the holy vessel, the goddess reborn. Is this how Rhea always thought of her, or did she only think this way because they'd never interacted before? I am Byleth Eisner, not Suthis. You forced us together, but I am still a person. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure where the issue lies. Rhea doesn't even look angry, she looks perplexed. Did Rhea ever see her as a person? Was Byleth always just a vessel to her? Byleth, let me take over. I promise it will not be for long, but Siros or not I don't think she'll understand unless she hears it directly from me. It was well hidden, but Byleth could feel Suthisa's anger. The change happened quickly as it always did. The first time it happened it was uncomfortable, like trying to jam your foot in a boot that's just a little too small. You can walk around for a little while, but it is a strain and the longer it's on the more it hurts. The few times they've done this since, it was a warm experience. Almost like being wrapped in a blanket. Suthisa's presence was a comfort after all, especially since they both knew it was temporary. When she noticed the green aura surrounding them, Rhea's confusion morphed into elation. Mother, it is you. She looked close to tears. So, you are Siros then. Byleth had never heard Suthisa's voice sound so cold before. You recognized me. I am so happy to see you again. Now Rhea, no Siros, really was crying. Byleth wanted to feel bad for her, but all she could manage to feel was dread. Siros reached for a hug for a third time, but like Byleth before her, Suthis moved out of the way. Why would you do it, Siros? Why would you try to sacrifice someone, a child, to bring me back? You should have known I would never condone that. Suthis was crying. I kept hoping I was wrong, that it wasn't you or that you were not trying to erase Byleth just so I could use her body as a puppet. I was not a good replacement for you, mother, so I kept trying to bring you back. Citrai was my 12th attempt, but I loved her. I was devastated when she died giving birth, but she begged me to save her daughter. I did all that I could, and when the crest of flames manifested. This didn't surprise Byleth. While she is happy that Siros loved her mother, Geralt didn't fake her death and run for no reason after all. So, you decide to raise a lamb for slaughter. No. I just wanted you back. Siros fell to her knees and sobbed. Wanting me back is all well and good, but I love Byleth. I care so much about her, yet you wish to erase her, to make it like she never existed. Even if I didn't love Byleth, the mere idea that you planned for me to take someone's life from them and puppet their body around is atrocious. Suthis was still crying. The knowledge that my own child would plot such a horrendous thing. Byleth put a hand on Suthisa's shoulder. It was painful to see her friend so devastated. I am sorry, mother, I just wanted you back. Almost everyone was gone, and I wanted to see you again. Suthis took a calming breath. Well, now you know I am back and with Byleth. I enjoy following her through life, and when she eventually dies, I will follow her through that too. A part of me wishes to one day re-establish a relationship with you, but I will not do it at the expense of Byleth's safety. You have essentially plotted her death for decades, and being near you makes us both uneasy. Sirose bowed her head. I understand, mother. Suthis hesitantly walked over and put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. I want us to move past this. To do that you must accept Byleth as well. She is a wonderful person, and I will not allow you to dismiss her as a mere vessel. I never meant for all this. At first, I really did just wish to save the baby. It wasn't until later that I even realized she could be a vessel. Sirose shook her head and stood up. After nearly a millennium of trying and being alone, I fear I became desperate. I am sorry for alienating you like this, and I am sorry for making the child feel any amount of unease. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. It would likely take some time, but Byleth was happy that Suthis had the opportunity to reconnect with her remaining family. Maybe after this she could convince Geralt to let her go to Faerghus for at least a little while. It would be nice to see Dimitri in person. Eventually the day of the Millennium Festival arrived. Dimitri had been eagerly awaiting this event. Work had kept Byleth away from Faerghus for moons, and despite his desire to go to her, Dimitri had had to travel to the border with Sreng. Sylvain had managed to make some headway with peace negotiations, and as king his presence was required for some of it. Dimitri knows a separation of only a few moons wasn't a truly long time, but any time away from his beloved is too long as far as he is concerned. Being at Garreg Mach was nostalgic, and this Millennium Festival is much better than the last one. There were no bandits to take care of, and he was not a feral beast snapping at everyone. Hopefully there would be one similarity though. He was planning on reuniting with Byleth in the Goddess Tower. As the king of Faerghus, it is not odd for him to attend the festivities, but he is worried about Byleth. While they had met once, she was still avoiding Lady Rhea. His beloved and Suthis told him they were willing to have some contact with the former archbishop in the future, but only if they had assurances about the woman's mental state and intentions. He fidgets with his eye patch in anxiousness. Lady Rhea, despite being retired and living in Xanadu, was present in the cathedral right this moment. Byleth and Suthis could have easily decided to skip coming because they are worried about being seen. Before even departing from Fhirdiad, he resolved not to get upset if they don't see each other. Her safety is more important than a ceremony that they can do at any time. That is if Byleth will have him. They agreed that if they both wanted to be together, tonight would be the night to extend his life. It's what he wants, so hopefully Byleth will agree with him. Dimitri's heart pounds as he climbs to the top of the Goddess Tower. What if Byleth doesn't come? What if even after all they've been through, she still decides that she doesn't want to be with him? She was free to make those decisions, of course. She deserves more than a wretch like him. No. He cannot think that way. If he is ever going to be worthy of standing at Byleth's side, he needs to actually believe that he does have the right to be there. Furthermore, the times that they were together since the war ended were wonderful. They actually got to simply enjoy each other's company and do fun things. Dimitri knows Byleth enjoyed herself as well. Her reactions to their activities made that clear, and she would have said something if she was having a bad time. When Dimitri reaches the top of the tower, he finds Byleth sitting against one of the walls, seemingly taking a nap. Her hair is a little longer than when he last saw her, but she hasn't changed otherwise. His footsteps must have woken her up because her eyes slowly open and she smiles when she catches sight of him. Hi. She looks truly happy to see him. It warms his heart. Dimitri walks over to Byleth and extends a hand to help her stand up. Hello. She takes it, and they stand there for a little while. He will never grow tired of just looking at her. Have you decided what you want? What you can live with? Her eyes are searching his face. Dimitri almost loses himself in their depths before he can bring himself to answer. Dimitri needed to focus. Long separation or not, getting distracted by her beauty was not appropriate right now. I want to live beside you for as long as you allow. I have considered the consequences of such a choice but feel I will regret not doing so more. He tightens his grip on her hand. Byleth smiles that mesmerizing smile of hers and unsheaths her dagger. We best get started then. Check the description for the links to the author.